Let's make a patch. I'm using my brother's 1600. I have my 4x4 hoop all ready. We're using cutaway stabilizer. Patches are dense. There are a lot of stitches in a small area, so we find that cutaway stabilizer is much more stabilizing as opposed to tearaway, which can actually rip and tear while you're doing your designs. I've chosen the Ducking Autocorrect for today's design. And as far as material, I like to use wool felt. 1, because it's cheap, and 2, because it doesn't fray, and it gives patches a nice thickness. You can buy all kinds of patch material like patch twill, and a lot of people use canvas. I prefer the wool felt. I like the thickness it has and that it doesn't fray. I think I said that already. So I have yellow thread all ready because I know that's going to be my fill color of choice for this design. Step 1 is going to be my placement and step 2 is going to be my tack down. So let's do step 1 so I know where to place my felt. So I do have my felt square already cut because I know the approximate size of this patch. So you want to take your felt square or whatever material you're using and place it over all of the stitches. Make sure it covers every stitch with little excess room. And then you need to secure this down in some way, shape, or form. If your felt square is big enough, you can pin around the outside. Just make sure you keep it out of the stitch area, or you can use tape of some sort. I buy this little roll of colored masking tape, about 6 different colors for about $10 on Amazon. And I'm just going to tape it down. I've kept it out of my seam allowance for the tack down. And then, looks good. So let's do our tack down stitch. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and remove my tape. I don't need it there anymore. And I'm going to trim my tail. Okay. So step 1 and step 2 are done. Now I'm ready to do my fill of my design. So that is the bottom layer of the design. Mine's going to be yellow. So at this point, I can go ahead and do the fill of my design, or I can go ahead and do the trimming. I would take my hoop off my machine, and then I would do all my trimming, or I can do that at the end. So you either do it before step 3 or before the final step. I'm going to wait and do it at the final step, but you do have that option to do it now. So I have my yellow in, that's the color. That's why I have yellow felt down. Typically, it's good to have 3 different colors of felt if you can't find lots of different colors. So I would recommend black, white, and gray. So of course, white is for your lighter colors, gray is for your medium, and black is for any of your dark colors. Match it as best you can to the fill of the design. So of course I have yellow. If I didn't have yellow, I would use white. All right, so let's go ahead. This is step 3. This is the fill of my design. All right, so our fill is done. It looks great. Sometimes the fill will be a couple of different steps depending on the design. So our fill on this one was just 1 step. It's time to do the rest of our design. And this one I chose one that was only 1 other color. So I'm going to put my black in. There we go. Okay. So at this point, step 1, 2, and 3 are completed. Step 3 is my entire fill or the base. And I'm going to do the rest of my design. Yours might have a few more steps, but I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of my design, and then we will talk about the final steps of patches. I've noticed that the tail did not get absorbed underneath, so I'm going to go ahead and clip it right away. I don't want it to get caught under any other stitches. Makes it harder to trim. There we go. So feel free, if your machine doesn't cut jumps, feel free to stop it when it finishes a bit and then it makes that little jump. Go ahead and clip it right then and there. Sometimes I found when I had machines that didn't cut jumps, it was so much easier to cut them right away. All right, so at this point, when your design is finished, you will have 2 steps left for your patch. The next step for this one will go around the outside of the patch, and that is my cut line. Now remember, I said I could have cut after step 2, but I can also cut after this step. So I'm going to go ahead and do this step, and then I will cut. Okay, so this is where I have to remove my hoop from my machine. Don't remove the design from the hoop, remove the hoop from the machine. I'm going to hold my arm down and pull it off. If you ever were to move this, and you notice that you do when you take your hoop off, if you have a machine that when you turn the machine off and turn it back on, it will bring you right back to where you left off, that's the thing to do if you know you've moved your arm. I do that quite regularly if I know that I've moved my arm of my machine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my handy dandy little scissors and I'm going to just trim as close as I can to those black stitches. Now, if I were to clip one of the black stitches, that's okay. Okay, you don't want to clip your yellow stitches, which is your fill. But if you do happen to clip some of the black, it's not a big deal. This is a little hard to do because everything is right in my face. I'm trying to get it on camera for you. You want to trim as close as you can. A nice curved tip pair of scissors works really well. I know I'm not using these the way I'm supposed to, but it's just because I'm peeking around my phone to see. But I want to get as close to those stitches because then I know, this very small edge of felt will get covered with my final stitch, my satin stitch. Oops, you can't see that again. Oops. And the final side. Normally this would go a lot quicker if I had it in my lap for clipping. Okay, now let's take a look. Let's see how we did. Now remember, this is really up close, so that looks a little bit bigger than maybe it really is in person. At least I always find that to be. I might trim a little bit more here. Nope, actually we're pretty good. I can usually tell by how far I can get my scissors underneath whether or not I've trimmed close enough, and I believe I have. All right, let's see. I'm going to leave my black in. That's the color I want of my satin stitch around the outside. And this is the last step. So I'm going to stop my machine and take it off. And no, I'm not going to take it off. I'm going to stop my machine and show you. See if I can move this a little closer. You can see where when it's doing the preparation for the satin, it goes right around the outside of where I'd cut. So I knew I had cut well, and it's going to get covered. If you can see that. So we have 3 lines of stitching, and that's where the satin is going to be. So that outside line should be just on your stabilizer, just outside the trimming that you've done. There we go, all done. Remove it from your machine. Back up the camera. And there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and trim it. I'm gonna get as close as I can to the edge without clipping any of my satin stitches. I will clip any jump stitches that I have between my letters as best I can. And I have a video on how to finish patches. So if you want to know how to get the stuff on the back and how to burn the edges. So I trimmed around my patch and cut as much away as I could. And then I got as many jumps between the letters as I could. Some of them aren't worth it because you can barely see them, and they can tuck into the other yellow threads. Okay, so I took care of my edges. I use a wood burner. Took care of all the stray tails on the back side. Just make sure you're not clipping any of the knots. Those are your tie-offs. You need those there. And there it is. I will go ahead and attach my Heat and Bond Ultra, and it'll be all set and ready to use. Good luck. If you have any questions, just ask.